The 17th of August 1943, Peenemünde Army Research Center, Usedom Island, Germany. The Baltic wind cuts across the dunes with a sharp, metallic chill, rattling loose boards along the edge of the concrete test stand. Floodlights glare against the low clouds, throwing long, nervous shadows across a line of men who have not slept. Somewhere beyond the perimeter fence, the sea breaks in a steady, indifferent rhythm, but inside the compound every sound is amplified: the clack of boots on poured cement, the hiss of steam, the distant whine of generators fighting the night. Major Walter Dornberger stands with his hands locked behind his back, shoulders stiff beneath his greatcoat. He does not look at the rocket yet. He watches the men instead: engineers with ink-stained fingers, soldiers gripping clipboards, a handful of technicians rubbing warmth back into numb hands. Many of them are young. Too young, Dornberger thinks, to be standing beside a weapon that could change the war or end their careers in a single catastrophic failure. A few meters away, Wernher von Braun tilts his head back and studies the sky. At 31, he looks more like a university lecturer than the technical director of Germany's most secret weapons program. His blonde hair is neatly combed, his face pale in the floodlights, his expression fixed somewhere between calculation and hope. He listens not to the wind, but to the sounds coming from within the rocket itself. Valves cycling, fuel lines pressurizing, the faint groan of metal expanding as liquid oxygen floods the tanks. This machine has been laughed at before. Von Braun remembers the Allied intelligence reports intercepted months earlier, their dismissive tone almost comical. Impractical, one had said. Too inaccurate to matter, another concluded. Rockets were toys, science fiction fantasies, expensive distractions from real weapons bombers, artillery, tanks. Even some within Germany's own military establishment had smirked behind closed doors, questioning why precious resources were being poured into a steel cylinder that could barely be guided. Dornberger clears his throat. "Countdown," he says quietly. A technician raises a hand, all systems green. Von Braun exhales through his nose, slow and controlled. He thinks of London not as a city yet, but as a concept, distance measured in kilometers, trajectories plotted on chalkboards, impact points reduced to coordinates. He thinks of the Führer's impatience, of meetings in Berlin where generals demanded results they barely understood. He thinks, too, of the jokes of how Allied planners had mocked the very idea of a rocket reaching across the channel. The countdown reaches 0. The night erupts. Flame blossoms beneath the rocket with a violence that shakes the ground. The sound is not a roar but a sustained, tearing thunder that seems to rip the air apart. Men flinch, some instinctively ducking, others frozen in place. The V-2, still officially called A-4, lurches, hesitates, and then rises, trailing a column of fire so bright it turns the surrounding dunes into stark black silhouettes. For a brief, terrifying second, it looks like it might fall back onto the pad. Then it climbs. Von Braun's heart slams against his ribs as the rocket punches through the low cloud ceiling, vanishing from sight. Instruments chatter. Pencils scratch across paper. A cheer starts somewhere and is quickly smothered. This is not a victory yet. Far downrange, radar stations track the arc of the flight, measuring speed that no artillery shell has ever achieved. When confirmation finally crackles through the radio successful flight, target area reached, Dornberger allows himself a single, sharp nod. He turns to von Braun, who is smiling now, not broadly, but with the restrained satisfaction of a man who knows something the world does not yet understand. Across the channel, the Allies remain unconvinced. The 3rd of September 1943. London, England. Rain slicks the streets near Whitehall, pooling along the curb as staff officers hurry between buildings with collars turned up against the damp. Inside a windowless briefing room, cigarette smoke hangs thick in the air. Maps of occupied Europe cover the walls, pins marking airfields, factories, rail junctions. A Royal Air Force intelligence officer taps a folder against the table, irritation clear in the sharpness of the sound. "Another report on German rockets," he says. "Same source, same claims. An American colonel leans back in his chair, unimpressed. Flying bombs, ballistic missiles, sounds like Buck Rogers. They can barely keep their fighters in the air. A low ripple of agreement moves through the room. The V-1, if it exists at all, is dismissed as a glorified pilotless aircraft no more threatening than the occasional nuisance raid. As for the V-2, the numbers don't add up. The fuel requirements alone seem absurd. The idea that a missile could strike without warning, faster than sound, is filed away under theoretical impossibilities. The meeting moves on to bomber allocations and shipping losses in the Atlantic. Back in Germany, Peenemünde does not sleep. October 1943. Peenemünde Army Research Center. The compound hums with activity day and night now. Trains arrive under cover of darkness, unloading components that are rushed into assembly halls shielded by camouflage nets. Von Braun walks the length of one cavernous building, boots echoing against concrete as workers assemble guidance gyroscopes with painstaking care. He stops beside a test bench where a young engineer is adjusting a delicate instrument, hands trembling slightly. "Steady," von Braun says, his voice calm. "The rocket will only be as precise as you allow it to be." The engineer nods, swallowing hard. Precision is the problem everyone talks about. The V-2 will never be accurate enough to hit a specific building, a specific bridge. It is a terror weapon. Dornberger admits privately a way to reach beyond front lines and strike cities thought safe. The ethics of it are rarely discussed aloud. There is a war to win. There are expectations to meet. Allied reconnaissance aircraft begin to take notice. November 1943. Over the Baltic Sea. A Mosquito photo reconnaissance aircraft slices through the thin winter clouds, engines purring smoothly as the pilot holds course. Below, the German coastline slides past in gray and white. The observer leans forward, peering through his camera, snapping frame after frame of a curious installation near Peenemünde. Long launch rails, unusual structures, scars in the earth that don't match any known airfield. The photographs will be studied, debated, argued over. Some analysts will warn that something new is taking shape. Others will insist it is too late in the war, too complex, too unreliable to matter. For now, the laughter lingers. In Berlin, Dornberger briefs senior officers who nod politely but ask about bombers and tanks instead. In London, planners prepare for an invasion of France, confident that air superiority and conventional weapons will decide the outcome. The rocket remains an abstraction, a rumor without teeth. But the men at Peenemünde know better. They have watched steel rise into the sky and vanish beyond the horizon. They have heard the instruments confirm what intuition already told them. The joke is over, even if the punchline has not yet landed. The first blows are coming, and when they arrive, they will arrive without warning. The 18th of November 1943. Peenemünde Army Research Center, Usum Island, Germany. The sirens begin as a distant wail, almost polite at first, carried in from the coast by the cold night wind. Inside the main assembly hall, conversation falters. Wrenches pause mid-turn, heads lift instinctively toward the ceiling, as if the concrete itself might offer answers. Wernher von Braun is bent over a drafting table when the sound reaches him. For a moment, he does not move. Air raids have become routine across Germany, but Peenemünde has lived in a strange bubble of confidence, remote, guarded, protected by secrecy and distance. The idea that the Allies might truly understand what is being built here still feels unreal. The sirens grow louder. "British bombers," someone says, voice tight. Von Braun straightens, rolling his shoulders back as if preparing for impact. "Shut down power to non-essential areas," he orders. "Secure the guidance assemblies." Outside, the sky begins to throb with a low, ominous hum. The sound is unmistakable now, heavy engines, many of them, approaching from the west. Searchlights snap on, white fingers stabbing upward, clawing at the darkness. Anti-aircraft guns swing into position along the perimeter, crews moving with practiced urgency. Major Walter Dornberger stands near the command bunker, binoculars pressed to his eyes, He can already see them, dark shapes sliding across the stars, methodical and confident. This is no random raid. The bomber stream is too precise, too deliberate. They know, he mutters. The first bombs fall seconds later. Explosions tear into the northern edge of the compound, the ground buckling as if struck by a giant hammer. Concrete fragments rain down, windows shatter. A shockwave slams into the assembly hall, knocking men off their feet. Somewhere, a fuel line ruptures, releasing a hiss that cuts sharply through the chaos. Von Braun is thrown against a steel support beam, the air punched from his lungs. For a split second, panic threatens to overwhelm him, not fear for his life, but for the work. For the months, the years of calculations and failed tests and fragile progress that could vanish in flame and rubble. "Fire in Hall 2!" a technician shouts. Another explosion follows, closer this time. The ceiling lights flicker, then die, plunging the space into darkness broken only by emergency lamps and the orange glow of fires outside. Men grope their way toward exits, coughing as dust fills the air. Above them, the Royal Air Force carries out Operation Hydra, the 18th of November 1943. Over Peenemünde, Wing Commander John Searby grips the control column of his Avro Lancaster as flak bursts blossom around the bomber formation. Black clouds erupt at altitude, rocking the aircraft violently. The intercom crackles with clipped voices, course corrections, altitude checks, calm professionalism layered over raw tension. Below, the target is illuminated by Pathfinder flares, the German coastline glowing with an eerie, unnatural brightness. Searby can see the layout clearly now. Long buildings, test stands, rail spurs. This is not an airfield. It is something else. "Bomb doors open," he orders. The Lancaster shudders as the payload drops away. Thousands of pounds of high explosive fall toward Peenemünde, aimed not at factories or barracks, but at the heart of something secret and dangerous. Intelligence briefings had been vague, speculative even, but the urgency had been unmistakable. Whatever the Germans were building here, it was important enough to justify the risk. German flak intensifies. A bomber to Searby's left takes a direct hit, fire blossoming along its wing. It begins to spiral downward, trailing smoke, the crew's fate sealed in seconds. Searby forces his eyes forward. There is no room for hesitation. Back on the ground, Peenemünde burns. Von Braun emerges from the bunker into a night turned hellish. Flames lick along shattered buildings. Ammunition cooks off with sharp, cracking reports. Medics drag wounded men across open ground, their faces ghostly in the flickering light. Somewhere nearby, a guidance laboratory has taken a direct hit, its roof collapsed inward like a crushed tin can. Dornberger finds von Braun near the test stand, both men shouting to be heard over the din. "They're targeting the research facilities," Dornberger says grimly. "Not random." Von Braun nods, jaw clenched. "They understand enough," he replies. "Enough to be afraid." The raid lasts less than an hour, but when the bombers finally turn back toward England, Peenemünde is changed forever. Entire sections of the complex lie in ruins. Dozens of engineers and technicians are dead. The illusion of safety is gone. Dawn reveals the damage in brutal clarity. The 19th of November 1943. Peenemünde Army Research Center. Smoke hangs low over the compound as rescue teams pick through debris. Craters pockmark the landscape. Twisted metal juts from the earth at unnatural angles. Von Braun walks slowly among the wreckage, boots crunching over shattered glass and concrete. He stops beside what remains of a guidance workshop, staring down at a smashed gyroscope half buried in rubble. This was the vulnerability he had always known existed but hoped would remain theoretical. The response from Berlin is swift and uncompromising. Production and testing will not stop. Instead, they will be moved underground, dispersed, hidden from Allied eyes. The rocket program will survive, but it will change. Secrecy will give way to urgency. Precision will be sacrificed for speed. In London, analysts pore over reconnaissance photos of the aftermath. They see damage, yes, but not annihilation. Reports conclude that the German program has been delayed, disrupted, perhaps even crippled. It is a comforting conclusion, but beneath the soil of central Germany, in tunnels carved by forced labor and lit by flickering bulbs, the work continues. The rockets are no longer a joke, and they are no longer theoretical. They are being prepared for war, and soon they will leave the ground not as tests but as weapons. The laughter fades, replaced by a silence heavy with anticipation. The 5th of December 1943, Mittelwerk Tunnel Complex, near Nordhausen, Germany. Water drips steadily from the rough stone ceiling, each drop echoing through the tunnel like the ticking of an unseen clock. The air is thick with dust, oil, and the sour stench of unwashed bodies. Rows of electric bulbs flicker overhead, casting uneven light across a cavern that seems to stretch endlessly into darkness. This is no laboratory. It is a factory carved into a mountain, hidden from bombers and built for speed. Wernher von Braun walks carefully along the narrow concrete path, boots splashing through shallow puddles. He keeps his gaze forward, though he is acutely aware of the men on either side of him, prisoners in striped uniforms, faces hollow, hands raw and bleeding as they wrestle heavy rocket components into place. Guards watch them closely, rifles slung low but ready. Here, the V2 is no longer a dream or a prototype. It is an assembly line. Von Braun stops beside a partially completed rocket, lying horizontally on its supports. Its steel skin is dull and unfinished, marred by weld seams and grease stains. He runs a gloved hand along its side, feeling the cold metal beneath his palm. This machine will not be launched in daylight to applause and careful measurement. It will rise from a forest clearing or a mobile platform, unseen, unheard, until it is too late. A production officer steps closer, lowering his voice. "We can meet the quotas," he says. "But quality." Von Braun cuts him off with a slight shake of the head. He knows what is being implied. Guidance systems are rushed, welds are imperfect, the pressure from Berlin is relentless. Hitler wants results, and he wants them now. Accuracy is a secondary concern. Terror is not. January 1944, Berlin. The briefing room is warm, almost stifling, a sharp contrast to the frozen streets outside. Adolf Hitler leans forward in his chair as Dornberger presents the latest figures. Charts and diagrams cover the table ranges, payloads, projected impact zones. The Führer's eyes fix on one number in particular: speed. "Supersonic?" he asks. "Yes, mein Führer," Dornberger replies. "The missile descends faster than the speed of sound. There is no warning, no interception." A thin smile crosses Hitler's face. "Then London will burn without hearing the sound of our approach. The order is implicit. The weapon will be used." February 1944. London, England. Winter presses down on the city, gray and unyielding. Sandbags still line government buildings, though the Luftwaffe's nightly raids have dwindled. People have begun to sleep more easily. Children return to school. The war feels distant, managed, contained. In an intelligence office near Trafalgar Square, a young analyst flips through reports with growing unease. There are fragments now intercepted communications, prisoner interrogations, whispers of a missile that cannot be heard. The conclusions remain cautious. No one wants to sound alarmist. The invasion of France is consuming every ounce of attention and resources. A senior officer glances at the file and shrugs. "If it exists," he says, "it won't change the war." Spring arrives, and with it, a new threat. The 12th of June 1944, Bois Carré, near Calais, German-occupied France. The launch crew works quickly, methodically, their movements practiced and efficient. The V-1 flying bomb sits atop its ramp, wings stubby and awkward, its pulse-jet engine silent for now. Unlike the V-2, this weapon is crude, almost ugly, but it is simple, cheap, and terrifying in its own way. An officer checks his watch. Ignition. The engine coughs, sputters, then erupts into a harsh, buzzing roar that vibrates through the air like an angry insect. Flames lick along the ramp as the flying bomb accelerates forward, lifting off and heading northwest toward the English coast. The 13th of June, 1944. London, England. The sound comes first. It is a steady, mechanical, buzzing, growing louder by the second. People look up from sidewalks and doorways, searching the sky. Some recognize it immediately. Others hesitate, unsure whether to run or watch. Then the sound stops. The explosion is sudden and violent, tearing through a residential street in Bethnal Green. Brick and timber collapse inward. Glass shatters for blocks. Smoke billows skyward as sirens begin to wail. Within minutes, rescue crews are digging through rubble, pulling survivors from the wreckage, counting the dead. The V1 has arrived. Over the following days, the flying bombs come in waves. Hundreds of them. They strike indiscriminately. Homes, factories, hospitals. Londoners learn the dreadful rhythm: buzz, 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 silence, impact. Morale is tested anew as sleep becomes impossible and nerves fray. Churchill demands answers. The 16th of June, 1944. Downing Street. Maps are spread across the table, red circles marking launch sites along the French coast. Air Marshal Sir Trafford Leigh-Mallory outlines countermeasures, fighter patrols, anti-aircraft belts, bombing raids against the ramps. The response is immediate and massive. The Allies throw everything they have at the threat, diverting aircraft and resources from the front lines. And still, the bombs keep coming. In Germany, the V1 is only the beginning. The 6th of September 1944. Hagbos, near The Hague, Netherlands. The forest is quiet, the kind of silence that feels unnatural. A mobile launch crew works under camouflage nets, their breath fogging in the cool morning air. The V2 stands upright now, taller and more imposing than its flying bomb predecessor. There is no engine noise, no warning sound. The officer in charge raises his hand. Ignition. For a split second, the missile seems to hover, fire pouring downward in a blinding white column. Then it surges upward, vanishing into the sky in less than 10 seconds. The forest settles back into silence as if nothing has happened. The 8th of September 1944. Chiswick, London. At 6:43 p.m., the ground erupts without warning. A thunderclap shakes buildings for miles around as a V2 slams into a residential area, leaving a crater and devastation where houses once stood. There is no siren, no buzz, no chance to react. People stumble into the streets, stunned and bleeding, asking the same question over and over. What was that? In Berlin, confirmation arrives within hours. The first successful strike on London. Dornberger allows himself no celebration. Von Braun hears the news in silence, his expression unreadable. The weapon they built has finally spoken. And London has begun to explode. The 9th of September 1944. Chiswick, West London. The smell of smoke and pulverized brick hangs in the air like a bitter fog, clinging to coats and hair and throats. Dawn reveals the wound left behind. A raw crater gouged into the street, rimmed with shattered homes whose interiors are exposed like broken teeth. Fire crews move carefully along the edges, boots crunching over debris, while soldiers keep back a small crowd of residents wrapped in blankets, their faces pale and stunned. A woman stands motionless near the cordon, staring at where her house had been. She does not cry. Her hands tremble slightly as she clutches a teacup someone has pressed into them, the porcelain rattling softly. There had been no warning, no drone in the sky, no rising crescendo of engines. One moment she was setting the table for supper, the next, the world had ended. A Royal Engineers officer kneels at the edge of the crater, measuring tape extended, notebook balanced on his knee. He looks up at the devastation and shakes his head. No aircraft debris, he murmurs to a colleague. Nothing at all. The word spreads quickly through official channels. The 9th of September 1944. Air Ministry, London. Inside a secure briefing room, senior officers lean over photographs rushed in from Chiswick. The images show a perfectly circular crater, walls scorched smooth by extreme heat, no shrapnel patterns consistent with conventional bombs, no wreckage, no clues that fit any known weapon. This wasn't a V1, an intelligence analyst says quietly. No engine, no approach. The room falls silent. Churchill arrives moments later, cigar clenched between his teeth, eyes already scanning the photographs. He listens as the analysts speak, their voices tight with the weight of their conclusions. When they finish, he exhales a long stream of smoke and nods once. So, he says, voice gravelly, they have done it. The 10th of September 1944, London Underground. Platforms are crowded again, not with commuters but with families bedding down for the night. The old habits return with brutal speed, children curled against parents, blankets spread on concrete, murmured reassurances whispered into the darkness. But there is a difference now. During the Blitz, there had been sirens, time to descend, to brace. Tonight, there is nothing. A man in a railway worker's cap stares down the tunnel, listening. He knows, rationally, that no sound will come. Still, he listens, hoping for something, anything that might give him a chance. Above ground, the city waits. The 11th of September 1944. The Hague, German-occupied Netherlands. A launch crew works with mechanical precision beneath the trees of Hague's Bos. The V2 stands fueled and ready, its guidance system aligned toward London. The officer in charge checks his watch, then nods. The missile rises in fire and silence, climbing beyond sight in seconds. The 11th of September 1944. Tottenham, North London. The explosion shatters windows half a mile away. A bus is overturned. A row of shops collapses inward, burying those inside. By the time the sound reaches ears, the damage is already done. In the aftermath, Londoners begin to understand the new rules of survival. There are none. The 12th of September 1944. War Cabinet Offices, London. Countermeasures are discussed with increasing urgency. Radar cannot track the missile in time. Fighters are useless. Anti-aircraft guns fire blindly, their shells exploding far below the descending weapon. The only real solution, the scientists admit, is to overrun the launch sites. That will take time. In the meantime, the strikes continue. One here, one there, no pattern the public can grasp. Factories are hit, rail yards, residential streets. The randomness is the point. Every impact carries the same message. Nowhere is safe. Across the channel, the German command watches the reports with grim satisfaction. Production numbers are still low, reliability inconsistent, but the psychological effect is undeniable. The Allies are being forced to divert resources, to explain to their people a threat that cannot be stopped. In London, funerals become routine once more. The city endures, as it always has, but the strain shows in small ways, in flinches at sudden noises, in sleepless eyes, in the silence that follows each distant thunderclap. The Allies had believed air superiority meant control of the sky. The V2 has proven that the sky no longer needs to be crossed to kill. The 18th of September 1944. RAF Bentley Priory, Middlesex, England. The operations room hums with quiet urgency, its polished floor reflecting the glow of overhead lamps. WAAF plotters move colored markers across the great map table, tracking aircraft, weather fronts, anything that can still be tracked. But one space remains stubbornly empty, the place where the new German weapon should be. Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding stands with his hands resting on the table's edge, eyes narrowed. He has fought this battle before. In 1940, the enemy came with bombers and fighters, loud and visible, vulnerable to interception. This is different. This enemy leaves no trail that can be followed, no formation that can be broken apart. A scientist from the telecommunications research establishment clears his throat. Even if we detect the launch, he says carefully, the missile's flight time is only 5 minutes. By the time radar registers it, it's already descending. Dowding exhales slowly. So we cannot stop it in the air. No, sir. The 19th of September 1944. Whitehall. Churchill listens as the reality is laid bare. Every proposal circles back to the same conclusion. The V2 cannot be intercepted. There is a moment of silence, heavy and uncomfortable, before Churchill speaks. "Then we shall destroy it on the ground," he says. The order ripples outward. Intelligence, air power, ground forces, everything shifts. The hunt for the launch sites becomes an obsession. The 20th of September 1944, northern France. Allied reconnaissance aircraft sweep low over forests, fields, and roads recently liberated from German control. Pilots photograph anything unusual. Disturbed earth, scorched clearings, tire tracks that vanish into tree cover. Analysts study the images with magnifying glasses, searching for patterns that might betray a mobile launch unit. The Germans have learned from Peenemünde. The V2 launch crews move constantly, firing from one location and vanishing before Allied aircraft can respond. Launch platforms are little more than reinforced concrete slabs or hardened roads. Fueling trucks disperse within minutes. By the time bombs fall, the forest is empty. The 25th of September 1944. Antwerp, Belgium. The port city is alive with Allied logistics, ships unloading, trucks rumbling, soldiers crowding narrow streets. It is also dangerously close to the front lines. At 9:45 a.m., without warning, the ground convulses. A V2 detonates near the city's center, killing dozens and wounding hundreds. Warehouses are flattened. Dock workers scatter in panic. The message is unmistakable. This weapon is not reserved for London alone. British and American commanders feel the pressure mounting. Antwerp is vital to the Allied advance. Every missile that lands there threatens the lifeline pushing into Germany. The 1st of October 1944. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, France. General Dwight D. Eisenhower studies a map dotted with red pins marking V2 impacts. His jaw tightens. "They're using it to slow us down," he says, "to force us to protect the rear instead of pushing forward." An intelligence officer nods. "And it's working, sir. We're diverting aircraft, artillery, manpower." Eisenhower leans back. "Then we end it by ending the war." The 3rd of October 1944. Middlework Tunnel Complex. Production continues under brutal conditions. Prisoners collapse at their stations, some never rising again. Rockets roll out of the tunnels, loaded onto trains bound for launch areas in the Netherlands. Von Braun visits less frequently now, his role increasingly overshadowed by the machinery of war he helped set in motion. He stands once more beside a finished V2, its nose cone painted, its guidance system sealed. A guard shouts at prisoners to hurry. Von Braun turns away, his expression unreadable. The 8th of October, 1944, London. Another impact, another neighborhood reduced to rubble. Newspapers print carefully worded reports, downplaying the threat, urging calm. The public understands anyway. There is no defense, only endurance. In the underground shelters, people listen to the distant city above, waiting for the sound that never comes. The 16th of October 1944. The Hague. A launch crew prepares another missile. One of the soldiers, barely 20, wipes sweat from his brow despite the cold. He glances upward as the V2 lifts off, fire illuminating the trees. He does not cheer. He has seen the photographs of the aftermaths. He knows what that column of flame will become. The 25th of October 1944. London. The city absorbs another blow, then another. The randomness wears people down more than the destruction itself. There is no logic to who lives or dies. A step taken 5 seconds earlier or later becomes the difference between survival and annihilation. In Allied command rooms, frustration turns into grim resolve. Every mile gained on the ground matters now, not just for victory, but to push the launch sites out of range. The front line creeps eastward, slow but relentless. The V2 remains unstoppable, but its time is running out. The ghost in the sky can only haunt as long as there is ground left to fire from. The 27th of October, 1944, Antwerp, Belgium. Morning fog drifts in from the Scheldt, dulling the sharp edges of cranes and warehouses along the docks. The port is alive despite the war engines rumble, winches squeal, voices shout over one another in a dozen accents. Allied soldiers move through the maze of cargo with clipboards and rifles, aware that this place, more than any other, keeps the advance into Germany alive. At 8:42 a.m., the world tears open. The explosion is colossal, a concussion that slams into the docks and throws men off their feet. A column of smoke and debris rises where a crowded square had been seconds before. Windows shatter across the harbor. Sirens scream to life as stunned survivors stagger through dust and flame, calling out names that will never be answered. Another V2 has found its mark. A British logistics officer pushes himself upright behind an overturned truck, ears ringing. He tastes blood and concrete dust. Around him, crates burn, ammunition cooks off with sharp cracks, and a dockside crane collapses in slow motion, its steel frame folding inward like paper. Antwerp has become a battlefield. The 28th of October, 1944. Allied Command Post, Antwerp. The casualty lists grow longer by the hour. Doctors work without pause, operating tables slick with blood, the wounded lined up on floors and hallways. Officers argue in low voices over maps, calculating tonnage lost, schedules disrupted, timelines threatened. "This port is our throat," an American general says grimly, "and they're squeezing it." Intelligence officers confirm what everyone already fears: the Germans have shifted focus. London remains a symbolic target, but Antwerp is practical. Every missile that lands here slows the Allied push, starves the front of fuel and ammunition, buys Germany time it desperately needs. The 30th of October, 1944. The Hague, German-occupied Netherlands. Launch crews receive new targeting coordinates. Antwerp. Again and again. The routine has become mechanical fuel. Align, fire, disperse. Each launch takes minutes. Each impact reshapes the war. One officer studies a map, tracing the missile's arc with his finger. He does not speak of victory. He speaks only of delay. The 1st of November, 1944. London. Churchill meets with his chiefs of staff beneath portraits of long-dead admirals and generals. The mood is somber, the language blunt. "We cannot protect Antwerp," a senior officer says. "Not completely. The only way to stop this is to take the ground they're firing from." Churchill nods slowly. "Then that ground must be taken." The 2nd of November, 1944. Near the Dutch-Belgian border, Allied infantry advance through sodden fields under low gray skies. The fighting is slow, brutal, and costly. Every hedgerow hides machine guns. Every village is contested. Progress is measured in yards, paid for in blood. Behind the lines, intelligence units race to identify launch areas before they move. Sometimes they succeed. More often, they arrive too late, finding only scorched earth and tire tracks fading into the trees. The 7th of November, 1944. Antwerp, another impact, this time near a cinema crowded with civilians and soldiers alike. The building collapses inward, killing hundreds in an instant. The city reels, morale fractures. People who survived the Blitz now face a terror that offers no warning, no chance to run. In London, newspapers report the strikes with careful restraint, but word spreads anyway. The V2 is no longer just London's nightmare. It is everyone's. The 10th of November, 1944. Middlework Tunnel Complex. Production quotas increase again. The tunnels echo with shouted orders and the clatter of machinery. Prisoners work until they collapse. Rockets roll out faster now, quality slipping, failure rates climbing, but enough work to keep the pressure on the Allies. Von Braun receives reports of impacts in Antwerp. He reads the numbers, the locations, the casualty estimates. He says nothing. The 15th of November, 1944. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Eisenhower listens as commanders outline the costs. Resources diverted, aircraft reassigned, ground offensives slowed. The V2 has not turned the war, but it has bent it, forcing decisions that ripple across every front. "We cannot afford to let this drag on," Eisenhower says. "Every day they fire is another day our men die on the ground." The 20th of November 1944, near The Hague. A launch crew prepares a missile under cover of darkness. Allied artillery rumbles faintly in the distance now, closer than before. The front is moving. The men work faster, more nervously. The missile lifts off, flame briefly illuminating the forest. Minutes later, Antwerp pays the price again. The 25th of November 1944, Antwerp. The port still functions, battered but alive. Ships continue to unload. Trucks continue to roll east. The Allies adapt, dispersing supplies, repairing damage with astonishing speed. The V2 wounds, but it does not kill the advance. In German command circles, unease grows. The missiles are landing, but the enemy is still coming. The weapon meant to buy time is running out of it. The 3rd of December 1944, near Nijmegen, Netherlands. Mud sucks at boots with every step. A thick, clinging mire churned by weeks of rain and heavy vehicles. The winter air is sharp and wet, carrying the distant thud of artillery and the faint smell of cordite. An American infantry lieutenant crouches behind a hedgerow, map pressed against his knee, eyes fixed on the dark tree line ahead. Somewhere beyond it, German forces are withdrawing slowly, stubbornly fighting not to hold territory, but to hold range. Behind him, a radio operator hunches over his set, listening to crackling reports from the rear. Antwerp has been hit again. London, too. The V2 seconds are still flying, even as Allied troops grind forward yard by bloody yard. "This ground matters," the lieutenant says to no one in particular. "Every damn field." The 4th of December 1944, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Intelligence maps now include a new set of lines, curved arcs stretching across the Channel and into England, across Belgium, into key ports and cities. These arcs define the reach of the V2. Eisenhower studies them in silence as officers brief him on the latest advances. "The closer we get," one officer says, "the fewer targets they can reach, and the fewer places they can fire from," Eisenhower replies. "The strategy is simple in theory and brutal in execution. Push the front east, overrun the launch zones, force the Germans to abandon sites faster than they can prepare them." The 6th of December 1944, near The Hague. German launch crews work with increasing urgency. Allied artillery can now be heard clearly, no longer a distant murmur but a steady presence. One crew abandons a site halfway through preparation when shells begin to fall nearby, scattering into the woods as explosions tear up the road they had intended to use for escape. A young sergeant looks back once as he runs, watching the unfinished launch platform vanish behind smoke and falling earth. The missile lies unused, a silent witness to the shrinking space Germany has left to strike from. The 10th of December, 1944, London. The attacks continue, but less frequently now. Still unpredictable, still deadly, but fewer. Londoners notice the gaps between impacts growing longer. Hope, cautious and fragile, begins to creep back into conversations whispered in shelters and queues. No one trusts it yet. The 12th of December 1944, Antwerp. Another missile hits the outskirts of the city, killing dockworkers and civilians alike. The port absorbs the blow and keeps working. Repairs begin within hours. The rhythm of loading and unloading resumes as if defiance itself has become policy. Allied commanders take note. The V2 can still wound, but its leverage is slipping. The 16th of December, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow falls heavily through the trees, muffling sound, cloaking movement. German armor surges forward in a desperate gamble, the Ardennes offensive, what the Allies will call the Battle of the Bulge. For a moment, the front line bends backward. Supply routes are threatened. Panic flares. In London and Antwerp, the fear spikes again. If the Germans regain ground, the launch sites might return. The 18th of December 1944, Berlin. Reports arrive thick and fast. Initial successes in the Ardennes are celebrated, but beneath the optimism lies a hard truth. Fuel is scarce. Air superiority belongs to the Allies. The offensive is a gamble born of necessity, not strength. The rocket program continues to fire when it can, but coordination frays. Trains are delayed. Launch units are disrupted. Some missiles fail on ascent, exploding harmlessly or crashing short of their targets. The 22nd of December 1944, near The Hague. A V-2 launches under overcast skies. Minutes later, the crew hears distant thunder, not Allied artillery this time, but the sound of the missile's impact far away. They do not know where it has landed. They rarely do anymore. The front is too close now. Orders arrive to prepare to withdraw. The 26th of December 1944, Antwerp. Christmas has passed quietly, somberly. Another missile strikes near a hospital, killing patients and staff alike. The outrage is immediate, but it is tempered by a growing belief that these blows are among the last. Intelligence confirms it days later. Allied units are approaching the final operational launch areas. The arcs on the map are collapsing inward. The V-2's greatest strength, its reach, is being strangled by advancing boots and tanks. Time, the very thing the weapon was meant to buy, is running out faster than any missile can fly. The 5th of January, 1945, near The Hague, Netherlands. A bitter wind cuts through the trees, carrying with it the distant rumble of Allied artillery. Snow crunches under hurried boots as a German launch crew works by lantern light, their breath forming white clouds that drift and vanish into the darkness. The forest feels smaller now, tighter, as if the war itself is closing in. The V-2 stands fueled and ready, its dark shape looming above the men like a silent accusation. There is no ceremony anymore, no speeches, only speed. The officer in charge checks his watch, glances once toward the west, and gives a curt nod. Ignition. Fire explodes downward, scorching the frozen ground. The missile rises violently, vanishing into the low clouds in seconds. The crew does not watch it go. They are already moving, throwing camouflage over equipment, scrambling for trucks. Within minutes, they are gone, leaving behind nothing but scorched earth and the echo of thunder. The 6th of January 1945, London. The impact comes in the early afternoon, tearing through a crowded area near Smithfield Market. Buildings collapse inward, steel girders twisting, stone walls disintegrating into clouds of dust. Screams cut through the chaos as rescue workers rush in, digging with bare hands when tools are not enough. It is one of the deadliest V-2 strikes of the war. Yet, even in the devastation, something has changed. The intervals between attacks are longer now. Days pass without an explosion. Then another comes, isolated, almost lonely, like an echo from a fading storm. The 8th of January 1945, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Intelligence officers brief Eisenhower on the latest assessments. Launch frequency has dropped sharply. Rail movements carrying rockets have been disrupted. Several known launch zones have been overrun or abandoned. They're running out of room, one officer says. And time? Eisenhower nods. So are we, he replies. Finish it. The 12th of January 1945. Middlework Tunnel Complex. Production has slowed. Power outages interrupt assembly lines. Materials arrive late or not at all. Prisoners collapse from exhaustion, some dying where they stand. The rockets that do roll out are fewer and more prone to failure. Von Braun walks the tunnels one last time, his footsteps echoing against stone walls blackened by soot. He stops beside a completed missile, smaller now in significance than it once seemed. The numbers no longer matter. The war is slipping away. The 15th of January 1945, Antwerp. A V-2 strikes near a residential block, killing dozens. It will be one of the final hits on the city. Dock operations pause briefly, then resume. Repairs begin almost immediately. The port endures, battered but unbroken. the 17th of January 1945. Near The Hague, another launch attempt fails. The missile detonates seconds after liftoff, a fireball ripping through the launch site. 2 crewmen are killed instantly. The survivors flee in panic, convinced the Allies are already upon them. Orders arrive that night: withdraw remaining launch units east. Destroy what cannot be moved. The 18th of January 1945. London. No explosion comes. People wait anyway, flinching at sudden noises, listening to the sky out of habit. The silence stretches, heavy and uncertain. Radios carry cautious reports: fewer launches detected, none confirmed that day. The 23rd of January 1945. Belgium, Netherlands front. Allied troops move into former launch areas, finding only burned patches of forest, shattered concrete slabs, and abandoned equipment. Engineers examine the sites with grim fascination, measuring scorch marks, photographing fragments. The mystery is finally becoming tangible. The 27th of January 1945. Antwerp. The city wakes to another quiet morning. No impact, no sirens. Dock workers glance upward, then return to their tasks. The fear has not vanished, but it no longer rules every moment. The last rockets are still out there, somewhere, but their voice is fading. The weapon that struck without warning is running out of places to speak. The 2nd of February 1945. London, England. Morning light filters weakly through low winter clouds, settling over rooftops still scarred by craters and patched with tarps. A milk cart rattles along a narrow street in Hackney, its driver pausing instinctively at a sudden bang, only a car backfiring nearby. He exhales, embarrassed by his own tension, and moves on. There has been no explosion for days now. In a small office near St. James's Park, an Air Ministry clerk marks another empty square on a wall calendar. No confirmed impacts, no emergency calls, no scrambled rescue teams racing through smoke and rubble. The silence feels unreal, as if the city is holding its breath, afraid that acknowledging the pause might somehow break it. The 3rd of February 1945. War Cabinet Offices, London. Churchill sits heavily in his chair, hands clasped around an unlit cigar. Intelligence officers brief him in measured tones, careful not to overstate what still feels fragile. Launch activity has effectively ceased, one analyst says. No confirmed firings for over a week. Rail movements from Middlework appear disrupted or halted entirely. Churchill nods slowly. Then it is ending, he says. Not because they chose to stop, but because they can no longer continue. Across the Channel, the reason is plain. The 4th of February 1945. Central Germany. Allied armor advances through towns that offer little resistance. German units fall back or surrender outright, exhausted and undersupplied. Bridges are blown too late or not at all. The Reich is collapsing inward on itself. A British reconnaissance unit moves cautiously through a wooded area once marked on maps as a probable V2 launch zone. They find nothing but scorched earth, frozen tire ruts, and fragments of burned equipment half buried in snow. One soldier picks up a twisted piece of metal, turning it over in his gloved hands. "So this is it," he mutters. "This is what scared London." The 7th of February 1945. Antwerp, Belgium. Dockworkers notice it first, not the absence of explosions, but the absence of waiting. The habitual glances skyward fade. Conversations lengthen. Laughter, tentative at first, returns to break rooms and loading platforms. The port remains damaged, but it breathes again, free from the constant threat of sudden annihilation. Military police lower alert levels. Hospitals stand down emergency protocols that have been in place for months. The city does not celebrate, it simply resumes living. The 10th of February 1945. Middlework Tunnel Complex, Thuringia. The tunnels are eerily quiet. Assembly lines stand idle, tools abandoned where they last fell. The electric lights flicker, some dark forever now. Prisoners sit or lie on the cold floor, too exhausted to move, too uncertain to hope. When Allied forces arrive days later, They walk through the vast underground factory in stunned silence. The scale is staggering. Hundreds of half-finished rockets line the walls like metallic corpses. Engineers photograph everything, cataloging a weapon that arrived too late and cost too much. The 12th of February 1945, London. The government authorizes cautious public statements. The threat appears to have passed. Newspapers print the words in small headlines, as if afraid to tempt fate. Londoners read them in buses, in kitchens, in shelters that are no longer shelters at all. Some feel relief, others feel only exhaustion. The city has survived another invisible enemy, but the scars are everywhere, physical, psychological, permanent. The 15th of February 1945, Antwerp. An Allied logistics officer reviews shipping manifests with something close to satisfaction. Supplies flow steadily now, unbroken by sudden destruction. The advance into Germany accelerates. What the V2 tried to delay is now inevitable. The 17th of February 1945, London. A child plays in the street where a crater once yawned open, kicking a tin can along the pavement. An elderly man watches from a doorway, leaning on his cane. He listens to the city, its ordinary sounds, its traffic, its voices, and realizes how much he has missed them. The weapon that arrived without warning has departed the same way, not with a final explosion, but with silence. The 4th of April 1945, Mittelwerk Tunnel Complex, Thuringia, Germany. The smell hits first: oil, rot, burned insulation, and something far worse. Allied soldiers step cautiously into the tunnel mouth, rifles raised, flashlights cutting narrow cones through the darkness. Water drips steadily from the ceiling, echoing down the vast underground chambers like a slow, funereal drumbeat. What they find is not a fortress, but a grave. Rows of V2 rockets lie abandoned along the walls, some nearly complete, others little more than skeletal frames. Their steel skins are dull and scarred, silent now, stripped of the power they once held over cities hundreds of miles away. Between them lie bodies, prisoners who collapsed where they worked, too weak to stand, too expendable to save. Some are wrapped in thin rags, others are nothing but bone and skin. An American officer lowers his flashlight, swallowing hard. He has seen death before: Normandy beaches, frozen forests in the Ardennes. But this is different. This is death, built into a system, engineered as carefully as the rockets themselves. Jesus Christ, someone whispers. The 6th of April, 1945. Mittelwerk. Allied engineers arrive under heavy guard. They move slowly, methodically, documenting everything: machinery, blueprints, guidance systems, fuel pumps. The technical brilliance is undeniable, so is the cost. One engineer pauses beside a chalkboard still covered in equations, unfinished mid-calculation, a prisoner's handwriting, shaky but precise. Nearby, a British intelligence officer flips through captured documents, production numbers, failure rates, casualty tallies from London and Antwerp, reduced to columns of figures. On another page, prisoner mortality rates are tracked with the same cold efficiency. The rocket war is revealed in full, stripped of secrecy and myth. The 8th of April 1945. Harz Mountains, Germany. Wernher von Braun and several senior engineers are located after days of searching. They surrender without resistance, stepping out from a hidden mountain lodge where they had been waiting for the Americans rather than the Soviets. Von Braun's arm is in a cast from a recent car accident, his face drawn and exhausted. He identifies himself calmly. An American officer studies him for a long moment. "You built the rockets that hit London," he says. Von Braun does not argue. He only nods. The 11th of April, 1945, London, England. News of the discoveries in Germany filters back slowly, heavily censored but unmistakable. Reports speak of underground factories, of forced labor, of thousands worked to death to build weapons that fell from the sky without warning. For many Londoners, the knowledge sharpens old grief rather than easing it. The fear had been invisible, Now the truth is not. The 13th of April 1945. Antwerp, Belgium. A memorial service is held near the docks for those killed by the missile strikes. Names are read aloud, echoing off the warehouse walls. Dockworkers stand beside soldiers, civilians beside officers. No one speaks of vengeance. The war has moved beyond that. They speak only of endurance. The 16th of April 1945. Middlework Tunnel Complex. Demolition charges are placed along the tunnels. The decision is final. This place will not be used again. When the explosions come, they ripple through the mountain, collapsing roofs, sealing chambers forever. Dust billows outward, swallowing the entrance. The factory that turned mathematics into terror disappears into the earth. The 18th of April, 1945. London. A government report circulates quietly among ministers. The V weapons killed thousands, injured tens of thousands more, and forced massive diversions of Allied resources. Yet, they did not change the outcome of the war. They changed something else. They proved that the future of warfare had crossed a threshold from bombs you could hear coming to weapons that arrived before sound itself. The reckoning is complete. What remains is the question of what will be done with what has been learned. The 8th of May 1945, London, England. Church bells ring across the city, hesitant at first, then swelling into a sound London has not heard in years without fear following close behind. Crowds spill into the streets, waving flags, laughing, crying, embracing strangers. Victory in Europe has arrived at last. Yet even in celebration, the scars remain visible. Craters patched with fresh asphalt, gaps where houses once stood, faces in the crowd that turn instinctively at any sudden noise, muscles tensing before memory allows them to relax. The war is over, but its habits linger. In a quiet office near Westminster, a civil defense official closes a final file marked simply V2. Inside are photographs of destruction, casualty reports, engineering diagrams, and psychological assessments of a population forced to live under a weapon that offered no warning and no defense. He sets the folder aside carefully, as if it might still explode. The 9th of May 1945. Antwerp, Belgium. The port celebrates too, ships sounding their horns in a ragged, joyful chorus. Cargo moves freely now, unshadowed by the sudden thunder that once fell from a clear sky. Dockworkers drink and sing, but many pause during the festivities, looking out over the water toward Germany. They know how close the war came to something worse. The 15th of May, 1945. Washington, D.C. American intelligence officers brief senior officials on captured German technology. V2 components lie disassembled on long tables, engines, guidance systems, fuel pumps cleaned and labeled like museum artifacts. Engineers speak in careful, excited tones about ranges, payloads, possibilities. The Germans proved it could be done, one scientist says. What comes next depends on us. The laughter that once greeted reports of German rockets is long gone. The 20th of May 1945. Bavaria, Germany. Wernher von Braun and his team are transported under guard, their destination deliberately vague. He sits quietly in the back of a military truck, staring out at the passing countryside. Villages lie in ruins, bridges sag. Civilians walk roads with everything they own in carts and bundles. The war he helped shape is over. The future he helped unlock is just beginning. June 1945, London. A small ceremony is held in a rebuilt neighborhood. A plaque is unveiled, bearing the names of those killed in a single V2 strike. There are no speeches about rockets or science or progress, only a moment of silence, broken by the ordinary sounds of a city learning how to live again. The Allies had laughed once, confident that no such weapon could matter. They stopped laughing when London began exploding without warning, when the ground itself became the messenger of death. They learned, painfully, that technology could leap ahead of doctrine, that wars could be shaped by weapons that arrived before sound and reason alike. The V2 did not save Germany. It did not change the outcome of the war. but it changed the world. From its fire and silence would come a new age of missiles, of spaceflight, of power measured not just in armies, but in equations and trajectories. The joke was over the moment the sky stopped giving warnings.